So, techno-feudalism. While capitalism has gotten worse, this is where we're at, chat. Or as it's described in the book Five Futures, this is called the Rentier future. I think we're going to be either the exterminationist future or the Rentier future. We're going to be kind of the compromise between those two futures. Those were called the bad futures in the book. Exterminationist is exactly what it sounds like. The surplus populations of the world get taken out. They get killed.
We talked about this often. One of the features of, I don't know how to call it, new phase in the world order, where, as you told me, we no longer live in this traditional neoliberal market order and so on and so on. I remember we were talking even on phone. You remember that moment? I think it was in the spring or summer of 2020, when on almost the same day that the numbers came out from United Kingdom and United States of how the production fell down, stock market went up. And then you say there is something tremendous happening now in capitalism. It's no longer the old market, profit, productivity, and so on.
It's no longer capitalism.
Can you develop this?
Yeah, I'll go back to that date.
So what Zizek just said is production in the economy went down, meaning we made less goods and services, less needs were being filled, less wants were being sated, and the stock market went up. Less goods in reality, and the stock market go up.
It was the 12th of August.
Can you give me this guy's background a bit? I know he's the leading communist voice, but what sort of his main takes, and there are any good references? It's hard to understand him. Slavoj Zizek is a philosopher from Slovenia who's written literally dozens of books. The best introduction to Slavoj Zizek is a movie he made called The Pervert's Guide to Ideology. Let me see if I can find a clip. Here's what I like.
I'm giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
I already am eating from the trash can all the time. The name of this trash can is ideology. The material force of ideology makes me not see what I'm effectively eating. It's not only our reality which enslaves us. The tragedy of our predicament when we are within ideology is that when we think that we escape it into our dreams, at that point we are within ideology. They Live from 1988 is definitely one of the forgotten masterpieces of the Hollywood left. It tells the story of John Nada. Nada, of course, in Spanish means nothing, a pure subject, deprived of all substantial content, a homeless worker in LA who, drifting around, one day enters into an abandoned church and finds there a strange box full of sunglasses. And when he put one of them on, walking along the LA streets, he discovers something weird. That these glasses function like critique of ideology glasses. They allow you to see the real message beneath all the propaganda, publicity, glitz, posters, and so on. You see a large publicity board telling you have your holiday of a lifetime, and when you put the glasses on, you see just on the white background a gray inscription. We live, so we are told, in a post-ideological society. We are interpellated, that is to say, addressed by social authority, not as subjects who should do their duty, sacrifice themselves, but subjects of pleasures. Realize your true potential, be yourself, lead a satisfying life. When you put the glasses on, you see dictatorship in democracy. It's the invisible order which sustains your apparent freedom. The explanation for the existence of this strange ideology glasses is the standard story of the invasion of the body snatchers. Humanity is already under the control of aliens.
Hey, buddy. You gonna pay for that or what? Look, buddy, I don't want no hassle today. Either pay for it or put it back.
According to our common sense, we think that ideology is something blurring, confusing our straight view. Ideology should be glasses which distort our view. And the critique of ideology should be the opposite, like you take off the glasses so that you can finally see the way things really are. This precisely, and here the pessimism of the film, of They Live, is well justified. This precisely is the ultimate illusion. Ideology is not simply imposed on ourselves. Ideology is our spontaneous relationship to our social world, how we perceive its meaning, and so on and so on. We, in a way, enjoy our ideology.
All right.
To step out of ideology, it hurts. It's a painful experience. You must force yourself to do it. This is rendered in a wonderful way with a further scene in the film where John Nada tries to force his best friend, John Armitage, to also put the glasses on.
I don't want to fight you. Come on. I don't want to fight you. Stop it. No!
And it's the weirdest scene in the film. The fight takes 8-9 minutes.
Put on the glasses.
It may appear irrational, because why does this guy reject so violently to put the glasses on? It is as if he is well aware that spontaneously he lives in a lie, that the glasses will make him see the truth, but that this truth can be painful, can shatter many of your illusions. This is a paradox we have to accept.
The glasses! Oh! Put them on!
The extreme violence of liberation. You must be forced to be free. If you trust simply your spontaneous sense of well-being or whatever, you will never get free.
What?
Freedom hurts.
All right. Outstanding movie. That was just a little clip from the movie called The Perverse Guide to the Ideology on a film called They Live. And it helps explain the world that you're living in today.
Less than 3.
There's a famous work called The End of History by Francis Fukuyama, where he said that liberal democracy, liberal capitalism has won, and the world will get to it's the end of history. That will proliferate over the globe, and that'll be the end. And we'll enter a period of peace and prosperity where everybody sees the humanity of another, and we will live in this cosmopolitan world of continual mixing and trade. And we are done with the ideological struggles of the past. One of the ideologies won. Liberal democracy, liberal capitalism, neoliberal capitalism has won, and it will lead us to the promised land. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but liberal democracy is on some pretty bad shape. Hasn't been in this bad a shape since the 30s, since the 40s. And the difference between this period of time of the challenge of liberal democracy and now is in the 30s and 40s, there was a left-wing alternative to capitalism that existed in the world. And now there is not. Now the really organized challenge, as much as we want to say Bernie Sanders and socialism is on the rise, and it is, as a response to the failing structures of liberal democracies, but the really organized and powerful force to challenge liberalism is from the far extreme right. The suicidal regime of fascism. And the neoliberal status quo is abandoning any vestiges of democracy and evolving into what Yanis Varoufakis is about to call techno-feudalism. And that is what fascism will be. They will be the foot soldiers. They will be the men at arms for a transition to techno-feudalism. So let's check this out.
2020, not last August.
So if you want to learn more about Slavoj Zizek, I think a really good starting point is The Pervert's Guide to Ideology. Read some of his stuff. He's got a ton of books. I mean, there's just, watch his appearances. He's really one of the most important thinkers on the left today. Now, I don't agree with everything he says, and he sometimes puts his foot in his mouth, and he's kind of a dirtbag leftist, so to speak. And he's from Slovenia, and he has a weird tick where he sniffles his nose a lot. But one of the most challenging and important thinkers of the left today. Definitely know a lot about Zizek if you want to get a little bit more deep in your thinking.
9 o'clock in the morning in London, the news came out that the national income of Britain, GDP as it's called, had fallen by more than 20%. That had never happened before in the history of capitalism. British GDP falling in 1 year by 21% or so. Never. It was not anticipated. The markets were expecting a fall of 8, 9, 10%, 20%. No one. 15 or 16 minutes later, the stock exchange, the London Stock Exchange, goes up by 3%.
I have an emote, DSA Zizek, if you want to know how to spell it. It's DSA Z, we should get it to you.
There can be no explanation of that along the lines of capitalism, right? One explanation would have been if the markets were already factoring in, expecting a 10% decline, and it was 8%, things were better than expected, so the stock exchange might have gone up. But to expect 10% and to have 20%, and the stock exchange to go up, something else was going on. I know what it is. I'll tell you what it is. Since 2008, the great financial crash, capitalism is on a drip feed. It's being kept alive through constant injections of money from the central banks. That has never happened before. It started in 2008. In 1929, it didn't happen. That's why all the banks closed down. So the banking system and the stock exchange had 12 years of getting used to, becoming addicted to, central bank money being pumped their way during difficult moments. So, imagine you're a stockbroker in London. You hear the news at 9 o'clock in the morning. Minus 20%. Oh my God! You think, that's the first thought. Then you think, if I panicked, the guys and girls in the Bank of England, the Central Bank of England, are panicking. So what they're going to do is they're going to print even more billions. And they will give it to me to play in the stock exchange. Buy. So the point I've been developing in my head, and we had a little discussion about this earlier, because I was telling Slavoj that this will be my next book next year. It's my crazy theory that capitalism has already evolved out of itself.
My issue with Giannis is thinking we could leave socialism and use Dem-Soc policies, but none of it rooted in the working class organizing, aka his DM25 electoral program. That's because that's where he comes from. And the truth is, we need foot soldiers, chat. You will never win by convincing liberals to be more bold. They won't. You have to have people that are angry, that are fired up, and that are willing to put something on the line to ever achieve change. The one thing I'll say about January 6th and the far right is they're willing to put their asses on the line. Now, they're delusional and they think that they're going to win and they're bullying, but at least they put their asses on the line, you know? And I see that and I say they failed, and it's our job as the left to punish our ideological enemies, because if they had succeeded, they would be rooting us out, root and stem. If the fascists get into power, they're coming for us, and they're coming for our organizations, and they're going to smash labor unions. They're going to smash DSA. They're going to rip apart trans rights organizations and gay rights organizations and abortion rights organizations. And you're deluding yourself. If you believe in any of those issues as important issues, if the far right wins, they're coming for you. That law in Texas is just a preview. You're going to wish that it was they're only taking $10,000 from you if they win. It's an economic term. This is just academic language. Yanis and Zizek aren't Twitch streamers. They're published writers, and this is a seminar. You can call it capitalism if you want.
It has been transformed to another system. And the reason why I say that is because, for me, capitalism requires two things. Firstly, profit to drive it. It's like, a petrol engine that needs petrol. Capitalism needs profit, private profit to drive it. Capital accumulation, as we Marxists used to say, okay? And the other thing is that exploitation takes place in markets. That's the whole point about capitalism. In feudalism, there was no market exploitation. You had the peasants, they were growing rubbish, wheat and potatoes and cauliflower, I don't know what it is, that they were growing, and then the sheriff, on behalf of the Lord, would come and take half of it, or 60% of it. There was no market, it was just expropriation. It is with the enclosures and the eviction of the peasants, who then become suppliers of labor at any price, that you have the creation of the working class and the labor market. There was no labor market before that. Okay? So exploitation takes place through markets. Money markets, land markets, house markets, labor markets. But now, after 12 years of the 2008 crisis and beyond, we have the replacement of profit by central bank money. That is the new fuel of the system, of this exploitative system. And the steady encroachment into the space of markets of platforms. Amazon. The moment you go into Amazon or Facebook, the moment you enter Facebook, you're outside of capitalism. You're not in capitalism anymore.
Because, explain.
Yeah, you go into Facebook, right? Let's say you want to sell your stuff, to advertise your business in Facebook. You go in, you use your credit card, you pay money to Zuckerberg, and some more people see your advertisements. You go in there to meet your friends. You want to advertise this evening. You go and pay money. One person owns the whole digital space. It is the equivalent of stepping outside in Ljubljana. Imagine, just science fiction for a moment. Imagine you step out in Ljubljana, on the streets of Ljubljana tonight, and you look around and you think, oh my God, all these buildings belong to one person. Everything that is traded in the shops that I see is controlled by one person who decides what prices are charged, what prices are not charged, who can trade, who can't trade, who can buy, who can't buy. And moreover, imagine that Ljubljana operated like Facebook does or Amazon does, whereby what your eyes see is determined by one person, by the algorithm of one person, who, if he wants you not to see something, you will never see it in that digital space. This is not a market. This is a fiefdom. It's a digital fiefdom. It's a platform. Those platforms make a lot of money. But the rest of the economy, look at companies like Uber, for instance. They've never made a profit, ever. You have private equity. Have you heard of private equity? Do you know what private equity does? They go and they buy a company. let's say a company that provides health services. It's got doctors and nurses and stuff, private stuff. So they buy the hospital, they buy the company, and then they create two companies. One that owns the buildings and all the fixed assets, and the other that provides the services. And the second company sells the services to the first company. The first company has assets, buildings. So they go to the bank and they get a huge loan using as collateral the buildings of the first company. They take this money and they give it to themselves. They pay themselves. They give it to the shareholders. They pocket it. They put it in their money. Now, this whole company will never have a profit because the second company will owe huge quantities of money to the first company, and therefore they will never pay any tax. Because if you have no profits, there is no tax. But the whole point about profitability is coming out. Very soon after that, this is an empty shell. This will go bankrupt. It will die. So platforms are expanding, even in health. Facebook is now privatizing the National Health Service in Britain without anybody knowing. Google is doing the same thing, behind the scenes. By the way, DiEM25, our movement, is beginning a campaign on Monday in Britain against the surreptitious privatization of the NHS by big tech, close brackets. So you see, platforms are expanding, they are not markets, and markets are shrinking, and central bank money, sovereign money, the defense money, because they are the governments, they have no power, but their printing presses are keeping the system alive. I call this techno-feudalism. It's not just a question of curiosity about how the system works, it's also a question of what does this mean for daily lives? What does it mean for all of us?
Have fun.
What does it mean for governments? I'll tell you what it means as an economist for a start. It means that none of the fiscal monetary policies that used to work. Because when platforms replace markets and everything depends on the central bank money, if I make you the head of the European Central Bank tomorrow, you are the most slavish follower of the needs of business. You have no independence, you have no authority. Even if you want to reduce the amount of money, euros, that the ECB prints, you can't do it. The moment you do it, the whole thing will collapse. That's not central bank independence, that's dependence. Our governments are completely in the clasps of the interests of these large fiefdoms, and they have tiny degrees of freedom regarding fiscal policy, regarding redistribution of wealth, when all the wealth is encased and enclosed in the new fiefdoms. But also, and here is something that would be nice to talk a little bit more about. Look, under standard capitalism, you have a working class which is exploited during the working time, and then they go home, and that's time for themselves. Today, you have a proletariat, a working class, which is shrinking, and increasingly, everybody is producing capital directly for these fiefdoms. Every time you have your phone and you walk around, Google knows where you are, and that enriches the software of Google Maps. It adds your movements, add capital to Google. You're not.
And then here, like, let's talk about this right now. Like, I'm on Twitch, and even my argument against techno-feudalism, the communication that I'm giving to you, is commodified, and it's generating profit for Amazon through the platform. There's no way for me to communicate to you the anti-Amazon message without Amazon is commodifying successfully through me, Hassan, and others the very message that's against them. Now, that doesn't mean that I should shut up, because there's an old saying among old socialists called, a capitalist will sell you the rope to hang him. It's an old saying. So we should use these platforms, but we should always keep in mind that what's the actual mechanism of what's happening when we participate in a Twitter thread, or talk on Twitch, or watch a YouTube video, or use Google Maps to go to a protest. Those acts are actually enriching those companies. That's insanity. That is the feudalism that is being created. Our very existence continually is generating capital for someone else. Which I read, by the way. It's, what future is techno-feudalism? Is it rentism? It's related. Yes, rentism is what it is. So in Four Futures, I talk about this before, but in Four Futures, the book, which I really enjoy, they have two axes, the x-axis and the y-axis. The x-axis is whether we live in scarcity or abundance, meaning does the earth and our ability and resources that we as humans reasonably can get, are they scarce, meaning they're like running out, or are they abundant? Right? Like, are we going to run out? If we run out of lithium, it doesn't matter that we have technology for electric cars. There's just not enough lithium to go around, right? So we need to ration stuff, right? We would need to ration the lithium. And how we ration it is the y-axis. If we ration it, so the y-axis is what's the way that resources are distributed? Okay, the y-axis is. If we distribute them for the benefit of humanity, well, then that will create the two positive possible futures. And if we ration it for the benefit of the wealthy and the powerful, that creates the other two futures, right? So first question is, what is the resource abundance in the future? And the second question is, how do we distribute those resources to people and for what benefit? Rentism is the world where there's a lot of resources, but we gate them off. And we put everything behind paywalls, and we make sure the wealth control everything. We create AI, we create robots that can replace labor. Well, who benefits? The guy that owns the AI tech, the AI patent, the guy who owns the robots, right? You lose your job as a truck driver. Well, do you get any of that benefit? No, you go become poor and desperate, and the guy who owns the AI trucking company becomes rich. Right? And then the other future is a resource scarcity. Well, in a resource scarcity future, if we make sure that everyone gets the maximum quality of life, and we overturn capitalism, and we focus on conservation and reclamation and recycling, and we try to create a smooth curve, we get to kind of like a steady state in the economy, we go beyond growth, that would be a socialist future that require a lot of state intervention and whatever. Or the other future is the rich control everything, we crash hard, and what do the rich do? They double down. And when our society can no longer produce enough food or produce enough consumer goods for large segments of the population, we get a collapse. The rich double down, they go behind walls, they get their robot dogs, and they kill the surplus population. And the surplus population starves to death or dies of preventable disease. And we see a significant decrease in the number of human beings on the planet because the rich control all the resources that are becoming scarce. Right? And then the communist future is we've got hyperabundance and it's being distributed for the benefit of everyone. That's communism. But that's the least likely future in my opinion. I guess we will have to use that giant military for infrastructure instead of oh darn, oh heck, how horrible. No, they'll use the giant military to kill people. Geometer, thanks for the tier 1. Oh, and somebody else subscribed at tier 3 and I didn't even thank you. Toxibol, thanks for the tier 1. And Siege X0, thank you for the tier 3 for 4 months in a row and 10 total. And Bandistray, thank you for the 11 months. And E-Town ZU, thank you for the 6 months. Long-time lurker. Thanks, buddy. And Dank Techno, thanks for the 12 months.
Shareholder. You don't get shares for that capital. They get it. With the pandemic, we've seen how work and leisure have been completely decoupled. And how with these digital fiefdoms technologies, it is impossible to even escape for a moment the vestiges of work. It follows you. Your boss expects you to be checking your app at midnight. You yourself check your app, even if your boss doesn't want you to check your app. You become self-enslaved. And the most important value of liberalism, which is personal sovereignty, goes. Think of the youngsters. I used to be a professor up until a few years ago. I still am in name. But I look at today's youth, and what I find is young people lacking the sovereignty that the liberal democratic system has promised them. I see them, for instance, take on courses that they know are rubbish, just to add to the CV. I see them constantly trying to improve their social ratings in Twitter, in Instagram, because they're selling themselves constantly. They are creating a profile that makes them, because they know that the moment they go in for an interview, that the interviewing panel is going to check their social media profile. So it's a constant struggle to build up a profile along the lines of the expectations of some fictitious future employer. That is slavery. The complete collapse of the private space that liberals value so much. These are the reasons why, for me, techno-feudalism, is such a menace. And the worst part of it is that when I speak of this, do you know who really loathes my thesis more than anybody else? The left. Because we leftists grew up with this ambition that we would bring capitalism down. And here I am telling them that, you know what? We are out of time. Capitalism has brought itself down. And it's been replaced by something far worse, not by socialism. The left does not want to listen to that. They really loathe that message.
Like me, I've been meticulously controlling what gets posted on my social media to present a polished image. Yeah, that's psychotic shit. That's psychotic shit. And Zoomers don't know anything else but that. They don't know anything else but that kind of world where you are expected to have every part of your communication, social media presence, life subject to your employer's supervision. That's psycho shit.